Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Melissa, it is so fun to see you.
So fun. I'm so happy. Thank you so much for doing this, Emily. Yay.
Yeah, I'm super happy. So, welcome. We have a lot of participants here today. It's really nice that you could get away from the office or school or whatever other kind of work thing you usually have to spend your Tuesdays doing. Melissa and I are both in our home offices, so we are basically doing what we usually do on a Tuesday. So Melissa de la Cruz is the number one New York Times, number one Publishers Weekly, and number one IndieBound best-selling author of Isle of the Lost and Return to the Isle of the Lost, as well as many other amazing novels for readers of all ages. So from middle grade all the way through YA, little kids. Her books have also topped the USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and in the LA Times bestseller lists. And she's published in more than 20 countries. She lives in Los Angeles with her family, and we are launching the adult thriller Going Dark. It's so twisty. It's a little bit sexy. It's full of social media drama and hijinks and false identities and secret pain. um, so, do you want to give us just like your elevator pitch for this amazing fun book?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Emily is the author of many of my favorite books, especially We Were Liars. So I'm so honored and thrilled to have Emily, my dear old friend. We have been in publishing a long time. So it's so nice to be here with you. Going Dark is a book that kind of came out of, kind of two, I guess, I don't know if I would call them obsessions. That's kind of embarrassing to say that I'm obsessed with. My kid says mom knows all the terrible stories that have ever happened to anybody in the world, so I'm always like, don't do that. Somebody, died at that park, or don't do that. Somebody got kidnapped. Like, I don't know whether it was my feed, but even when I was like 20 years ago in AOL, I would tell my husband, did you read that story about this terrible thing? And he'd be like, what news are you reading? Like, I don't know any of these stories. And sadly, one of the things that, I mean, as a consumer of media, you've just seen, of course, now my brain is frozen. It's like the girl in Aruba, Natalie, who was missing and then found dead, just kind of these stories that you just get so much media coverage, and the latest one was sadly Gabby Petito's very sad story. And then, just kind of reading a couple of things in newspapers about, other missing girls and how some of these girls we never hear about, we only hear about kind of these telegenic media ready, they have nice photos. And so somehow they capture the public's imagination in a way the public cares a lot more about when they go missing, whereas all these other girls who've gone missing, you hardly hear peep. And mostly they are about, women of color, girls of color. We don't hear about them as much. So, I kind of had these two ideas. And then I also wanted to write, kind of a thriller about influencers, and also about how, these girls that you see online and they have these perfect lives, everything just looks so amazing. They're always in Italy, they're always on vacation, their lipstick is perfect, their hair is perfect, their boyfriend is perfect. And I thought there was something there about the perfection and the facade of social media. And then also, about, when somebody goes missing, who do people care about? So I wanted to kind of put those two ideas together. And, it's funny how when you write a book, you don't really know what it's about, also almost at the end. And it's also about sisters, and I have a sister that I dearly love. And I write about sisters a lot, but I don't write about our relationship. I write about, kind of like the love that you have for a sister. So the sisters, I don't know if this is a spoiler. The sisters in the book are not about me and my sister, but just about, kind of that closeness, and that
Mm-hmm.
bond. So.
Yeah, so I found this like a really fun read. I just like when, I got on an airplane and then suddenly I was in California because your book was like completely captivating me. And one of the characters that I got interested in, oh, and I want to say before we start talking amongst ourselves, a lot of people who signed up to come and hang out with us today sent in questions. And so the whole second half of my conversation with Melissa is going to be me asking the questions that you all sent in. But you could also put questions in the Q&A box in the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And there are too many questions already for, I have a ton, and the people who sent them in advance also have a ton, but we want to see your questions in the Q&A, and we will definitely get to at least a couple of them, I promise. So don't hesitate. You can pop those in anytime, and then we will look at them when the time comes. Okay. So my first question is, one of the characters is like a coder, a hacker. Her name is Harper, and that was, I came to your books like through the sexy vampires and through the affairs. Right? Melissa and I have known each other a long time. And I remember, I know I already knew you because I got invited to this party that you had, but you had an amazing party for Blue Bloods where everyone was like vampire style. Do you remember this party?
Yeah.
Maybe not. We had many of these parties, but I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever been invited to in New York, because everyone was like super, super goth and, looking like they might bite someone at any minute. And it was a blast. But anyway, the kind of, nerd hero is not like the usual in your books. And I really liked this character, Harper. And I wondered kind of where did she come from and how did you get into her?
Yeah, when I first wrote the book, I think my first draft did not have Harper in it, and it was missing something, and I felt like there was a part of kind of the audience, like, and my husband always calls me, oh, you're just such an internet detective. We're on the internet, we see our friends' lives, we see celebrity lives, and then we piece together stuff. And and in a way, he kind of does it disparagingly. Oh, internet detective, you don't really know what's going on. But the internet detectives were the ones who also helped with the Gabby Petito case. I mean, they found the van, and I thought that was so amazing that somebody just kind of engaged on the internet, heard about the story, looked up, oh, we were there at that park, let me look up the feed, literally found it. And that kind of still gives me chills. So that was kind of the inspiration for somebody who was very much online, but very much kind of an observer, very much has my personality as like kind of a nerdy internet detective, wants to solve something. She even has a last name that's kind of like me. So I think she's kind of a stand-in for the audience, for the people who are not quite involved in stories, but you get pulled in, through it being on the media, through it being online, and, even with the latest story, I think there was an indie author who faked her own death, and, so many of our relationships. Did you hear about that, Emily? So she is an independent romance writer who 3 years ago, basically her, said that she had sadly, kind of committed suicide and she was dead. And then this year she came back and said, oh, I didn't die. That was I just needed to get offline. Yeah. And everybody was like, we mourned for you. Like, we were sad, like we grieved, like, it was so crazy. It's this crazy story. So it really is like, some of your friends you only see online, you only know through text, you only know through pictures, but you feel for them.
Oh, sure.
And
I have a pen name, and I
yeah,
have known many people for a million years who
thought that,
don't know
yeah,
my legal name.
yeah,
I could die online to those
I
people.
know your legal name if you want. Yeah, no, but so I think Harper kind of came from that, like kind of a stand-in for all of us who are so on our screens all the time, kind of, really living through, being part of the story in that way.
Right, right. Going down that rabbit hole, but having it be actually
Yeah.
productive and affecting the case.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So In Going Dark, as I'm sure everybody can tell already from the flap copy and also from your description, right? A social media darling, a travel blogger, a sort of beautiful young woman who loves to write about food and travel, goes to Italy with her boyfriend and goes missing in the middle of this trip that she's been documenting.
Yeah.
And so that's the mystery. And it's told from several different points of view, right? From the boyfriend who gets naturally accused of doing away with her, to Harper, who is investigating the mystery from the armchair, and so forth. And so Amelia is in some ways like a character that we've all seen before. Like we probably all have one or two such style bloggers or food bloggers or something that we follow on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever. Um, but she's actually a lot more complicated than she seems on the surface. And I wanted to know sort of like, where did you start? Did you start with knowing what all her truths are, or did you start kind of with the surface and work backwards? What'd you do?
It's funny because I'm in the middle of writing an outline for my books. And, sometimes, I finished a book, I made my January deadline, and, I kind of had to just rest for a while and rest the brain. And, I opened my blank page, on the computer, and I was like, how do I do this again? How do I start? Because you think that, after, all these years, 25 years of writing books, that I would know how I start, but I really had put in so much in that book and I was just dead. And I was like, oh yeah, I always start with the end. I forgot that. Like, so I literally always know the end, and I will outline the end first. So I always outline act 3 first. And I have no idea what happens in act 1. Oh, I do. I know how it starts and ends. So I knew who she was. I always knew that she had a secret. Always knew she was kind of fake, that she was just pretending to be this person. Again, sorry for the spoilers, but it's fun. But I knew that. I knew who she was. So I started with that and then kind of build the layers of, it's funny, like these influencers, I was a magazine editor, and before then I was a teenager who loved magazines. And I do feel like that kind of, aspiration, that kind of, obsession with that kind of image has now transferred from reading Vogue and Vanity Fair into these influencers who are living the life, that we all wish we were. I actually have on my other screen right now, this Harper's Bazaar editor, and the fact that she's an editor at Harper's Bazaar, but then you look at her Instagram and I'm just like, oh my God, I want that life. I want that dress,
Who's that? Wait, I want to know who you're.
So I follow, so I was an editor at Lucky a long, long time ago, and Marlene Rentmeester was our market editor. And then she just posted something with Amanda Alagem. So, it's not somebody that I knew back in the day when I was a magazine editor, but she just is wearing this really wonderful dress and she's at some New Year's party. It just looks fabulous. So, so I did, and I see my kid, I have a 16-year-old, and I see what she sees online. And I always say, it's all fake. Nobody has a life like that. Nobody is that happy. Nothing is that perfect, and you just constantly I have to tell that to my kid. But then, as my husband said, you worked in magazines, so much of it was fake and airbrushed, even the stories that we wrote, not that they were fake, but they were definitely a story that we were selling. And he says, and then you are the one who believes all of this. Like, and I look at Instagram and I believe it, so I think that's really, it's hard to parse, it's part of our life now that people kind of almost have to look perfect online. And I noticed that nobody really likes when you're kind of a downer, it's not the place for that. It is a highlight reel, and that is what people like to see.
Yeah, I do find that's true in my own consumption of. I mean, I like content that has a certain amount of rawness to it, I think. And I think that's one thing that's nice about TikTok that's different from Instagram. Sometimes it's a little rougher, a little rawer, but everyone is still performing, even the people who don't appear to be performing.
Yeah.
It's like it's all a tap dance or
Yeah.
or a whatever Wednesday dance or whatever it is. But um, and I think, we make stories with words, and now we're in this funny position of like, we've got our ring lights on and our makeup on and whatever we've done to our hair, and like, this is not how I wake up in the morning at all, right? And after this, I'm gonna make like 6 TikToks because I don't look like this every day.
Yeah,
I
no,
put
I
makeup
actually,
on for you, Melissa. So, but also for all the people who are here, right? So I think that like your book is about that tension that we all feel, and like, it's not bad to tell a story or to show a highlight reel. I'm not saying that at all, but it's about how complicated and messy it is when that's a huge part of how people perceive you.
yeah. And it's funny because, I kind of resisted it for a while. I just thought nobody's interested. Like, really? You want to see like there's an app now called Be Real that we're on, right? And
Oh yeah, I
it's
had to stop being on it. I couldn't be real.
but it's funny because when you look at the Instagram that I post, it's like I'm always out at parties and there's the book launches and my hair is always done. And on Be Real, literally for 30 days, it was just me in front of my computer, like working, and that's the side that people don't see, and and I just thought how funny that was. And I just like, my hair's never brushed and I'm always wearing pajamas, so at least there's a little bit of that. But oh, sorry, I was gonna say, so one day on Instagram, I posted, my office with all the papers, on the floor and my messy desk, and I just turned in a book and I said, this is what it looks like on deadline, but I didn't realize I had to perform being an author, but here you go. And then one of my readers said, that's so disparaging. We're not performing, we're taking, this is, we're interested in what, the real life of an author is. And I felt like, oh yeah, okay. So maybe, maybe I was too judgy about that, because some writers just are more natural, they'll think about it and they'll post it on TikTok. I mean, I have an assistant who runs my TikTok account, and she sends me all these TikToks to do and I never do them. Finally, she said, you're never going to do them, so I'm just going to make some graphics for you. And yeah, it's hard because you think, well, I got to put the makeup on, I got to put the hair on, and that just takes too much time.
Oh, and you just want to write a story. Like,
Yeah,
that's what I feel like. Like I can make such a better novel than I can a TikTok.
yeah,
Like
100%.
my TikTok is gonna be mediocre. Let's face it. It will be.
Yeah.
There's no, and it's okay to be mediocre out in public. It's fine. But like I want to make a piece of art, right?
Yes.
And some people can make beautiful art on these social media, like or really great entertainment.
Yeah.
But I make the things with the words, and so do you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about, because you have an imprint at
Yeah.
Disney Publishing. Congratulations.
You.
And I know that Live Your Best Lie is a thriller that's coming out from MLDC very soon. And when I was touring around for Family of Liars, whatever, last spring and summer, I feel like I did events with like every female thriller writer who had a book out that year. I read so many, and I was like, okay, this is a lot of thrillers to read back to back, but it was very fun.
Yeah.
And I wondered, like, now it's almost or a big chunk of time later, but also because what's in the pipeline at your imprint. What do you think are, clearly thrillers are a, very successful category in YA and also in adult domestic noir. What do you have an assessment of the lay of the land in terms of thrillers?
Yeah, no, I think definitely, it's a trend everywhere, it with the, kind of like with Serial, with Making a Murderer, I mean, it was like a podcast, there was just like a lot of true crime feeling in the air, which I think has bled into thrillers, not just, yeah, domestic thrillers and then YA thrillers, new adult thrillers. Yeah, I think it's a genre that's kind of, kind of starting to explode, I would say. I don't even think we've reached the peak of it yet. I think the kids are gravitating to it in a way, and readers are gravitating it a way. Um, yeah, I don't know. It is kind of a new kind of escape. It's not the vampire escape. It's not the romantasy escape. It's like, an escape into a grittier story. I don't know. I think the mystery, I think mysteries have been around forever, but seeing like kind of even like an Agatha Christie kind of revival, in storytelling, with like Knives Out and Glass Onion, being so big. And my husband and I were kind of disappointed in it because we were big Agatha Christie fans. We were just like, well, it's just Agatha Christie. Like, there's nothing new. I was like, where's the new stuff? So we're very critical. But I think a lot of people, are discovering it for the first time.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think that whole Knives Out, like the the detective genre in which total order is restored at the end is different than like a thriller like You, for example, or Dexter or something where
Yeah.
terrible people are on the loose and will continue to do their terrible things even if the plot has kind of wrapped up. Um, but that Agatha Christie Knives Out type of mystery, I find it very consoling as a reader. Like it can be super gory, it can have blood everywhere, all kinds of terrible things can happen. You can confront ultimate evil, but at the same time, order will win. The detective will line everything up. Everything will be explained completely. So you're not left with a feeling of the eerie or of the unsettled,
Yeah,
right?
no, it's very comforting. Justice is served. We find the bad guys and they're put away, and Hercule Poirot, drinks his tea, or I can't remember anymore. No. What is it? It's the green thing, because creme de menthe. Because my friends and I were
Yes.
talking about, have we ever had creme de menthe? We should get some creme de menthe. Hercule Poirot really likes it.
I think it might not live up to the hype.
Yeah. It might taste like toothpaste.
Okay, so now, I mean, I actually have like 10 questions that I haven't gotten to ask you about, but I'm going to take some audience questions. So Neha asked, how do you decide if an idea is good enough to be turned into a novel? And I would be very interested to hear this too, because I have a lot of ideas that I'm not sure are good enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question, because I don't know about you, Emily, but even my family will pitch me ideas for books, and it's and I'm not going to say it's annoying because it's my friends and family and people you happen to have lunch with, and and I'm always, I think somebody and another writing friend said the best way to kind of dismiss things is to say, that's an anecdote. That's not a novel. I mean, if you have one tiny, funny thing, quirky thing that happened, or that's a premise, that's a setup. What's the story? I think people don't realize like a novel has to have more than that, more than just one funny, quirky thing or one little idea. I think a novel is a lot of ideas, it's like we got to fill a 300-page book. And what I do is like, I like to think about things for a really long time before I make it into anything. So, I have a lot of books coming out, but, many of them, I would say Going Dark from idea to execution is one of the shortest, because, I had it really quickly and we sold it really quickly, and Union Square said, we got to publish it soon. So how soon can you do? So it was very fast, but that's usually not how I work. Headmaster's List, which is coming out in a month, which is my YA thriller. This is new adult. It's college kids and kids in their 20s. Everybody's a kid. When you get to be my age, everybody's young. It's so crazy. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. But Headmaster's List was an idea that I had for many years. It was probably 5 to 6 years, and I actually originally wanted to write it from the point of view of the parents. That this terrible tragedy happened to their kids, and kind of point the finger at the parents and the terrible parenting and the adults in LA who are behind that. So we tried, I tried it that way. But then, I realized that, I really write for a teen audience, and I couldn't quite get traction, with doing it as a full kind of adult domestic book. So I retooled it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to focus on the kids. And then the kids became more interesting to me and more natural. So yeah, I think I like to think about things a lot. I think if, if the ideas don't stick and they don't, if not something that you're thinking about, even a week or a month later, then it's probably not something that you are interested enough to do, right? Like, to flesh out.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Sometimes I find that like I want to put things together. Like I'm like, oh, these art gallery exhibits that I went to, I feel like they go in this story about some total other thing. And I don't know why until later. And sometimes I'm wrong and I have to pull all the art gallery stuff out and junk it. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'm like writing my way through it and it's kind of muddled and blah, blah, blah. But eventually I'm like, aha, I can see how, these little excursions in the book inform the actual plot and the themes. And eventually I get there. But sometimes it's can be very messy, and I've been, holding something kind of in my imaginary backpack for a long time, wondering like, what do I do with this thing that I think is interesting?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think to be a commercial writer, and I told some friends and maybe my family that, I figure out what they want, like as in the publisher and the reader, oh, we want like, a vampire story. And I'm like, okay, I like vampires. But then I figure out what I want, what do I want to write about? And I'll be like, oh, I want to write about, the history of Paris, so it's going to be a vampire story, but I'll have like this Paris and this like party that I read about that the Baron threw. So I find a way to make it something that I want to do, in a big genre that everybody else wants to read. And I think that's kind of what commercial fiction writers do. I don't know.
That is
my
good
theory.
advice. I'm going to take this advice.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a couple quick questions from audience members. Rita asked, will there be an audiobook for Going Dark, and when will it come out?
I thought there was. I wasn't quite sure. I don't think it's available yet, so I don't know. I'm sorry. I know I got this question on Twitter as well, and I just didn't have time to look through, because I do get here we're casting for the audiobook. I think no, wait, we did cast for the audio. No, that was the other one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know if no.
Sorry.
Michelle asks, do you have a favorite book that you've written?
Every book that I'm working on at the moment is my favorite, right? I mean, we don't look backwards. I'm always really interested in the work that I'm doing now. So I can't say that I really have a favorite, although I always really like the books that nobody else liked. Like, oh, that was the one that I just liked, so it's kind of like, you love the redheaded stepchildren the most because they didn't get us not as much love.
So what's a redheaded stepchild that of yours that we should send people out to read?
Well, The Ring and the Crown came out, I think almost 10 years ago. And, it didn't quite get the reception that we thought it would, and I was really, really proud of that book. It is actually one of my favorite books. I'm really proud of that book. It was inspired by War and Peace and by the Arthurian legends. And I just thought it was such a great book. And, it didn't quite make a splash, but now it's going to be a Disney Plus show. I just read the pilot script.
So fun.
And the Disney Plus people love the book, and the producers and the screenwriters. So I think, now with a bigger audience, people will find out about it and see how good it is. So I'm really excited about that. It is one of my, I guess I can say it's one of my favorite books that I've written.
That's lovely. I'm so excited for that.
Thank you.
Kathy asked, what books did you read as a child? Did you have like beloved rereads, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a big Lord of the Rings fan. That was one of the books that I always reread. And I still have my copies from high school here, so they have like the old covers. Dune was also a big favorite. So Dune, Lord of the Rings, and then I was a huge Stephen King fan. So read almost all of his books up to until the 2000s when I went to college. I just kind of got out of the habit of reading them. I don't know. I don't think I've outgrown him though. I just got a little too scared. When you're younger, you can be scared and it's great. But when you get older, I think I felt a little too like, oh, I don't want to read about that. That's too horrific. But I just bought Fairy Tale and I'm really excited to read it because I don't think it's supposed to be scary.
Um, Jessica asked, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, I saw that earlier on the sheet. And it's funny. I think the best advice I've ever received is like a technical piece of advice from the editor who bought my first book, Jeff Klosky, who is now at Riverhead. So he was at Simon Schuster a long time ago. And he was basically the first editor who ever encouraged me and loved my writing. And he bought the book, but Ari edited it. And he told me, because I actually turned in my first novel to him and he didn't buy that. He bought my third novel, which became my first novel. But during meetings about the first novel that he did not buy, and he said he didn't buy it because it was too slow and there was no plot. He said, you have a voice, but not a plot. And he said, one of the things that, people have to do if you're writing, anything with a romance is you got to meet the love interest in the first 30 pages. Otherwise it's just too late, like people lose interest. So I always have that. I'm like, have we met the love interest in the first 30 pages? So, that I think that's the best piece of advice I've ever had, because otherwise I think your story can drag, for even 100 pages without anybody really noticing. And nobody really knows what's wrong with it, but what's wrong is you got to meet him or her in the first 30.
I feel like sometimes for me that those like very practical things, like get your adventure started after a fifth of the book is over.
Yeah.
Like if it's not going by that time, it's
Yeah.
too late.
It's
And I have revised, like it's such a like that's not going to show you how to have a voice or show you how to build characters. But like when I look at a book of mine in the middle of the process and if something is wrong, I'm like, all right, how long is this animal? And how, okay, it's 300 pages. So what page do I have to be on the big adventure by?
yeah.
And usually I'm like, oh, literally like 40 pages earlier than I have it starting. And I'm like, okay, so what can I do? And so like a very concrete thing like that, like get that love interest in, get the adventure going. It's like,
Yeah.
those are the things we have to remind ourselves of all the time, because sometimes we've doodled around for a lot of
Oh, yeah.
pages.
No, I was just writing a proposal and then I realized the whole backstory is the story. I was like, oh, wait, no, we start freshman year, not sophomore year. Everything happened freshman year. We got to go there. That's where the story starts. We're not going to tell it in flashbacks. So even though we know all this, you still make that mistake, and I think, learning that writing and accepting that writing is a process is still something that I have to do every day. It's a process. You're not going to get everything right. You just have to go through the journey and then you'll get there.
Yeah. Faria asked, do you have a writing routine, and what is it?
Yeah, after 20 years, I think I've got it down. So before I had my kid, I always wrote at night. And, it was just quieter and I was just a night owl. And, I would just be up until, 2 or 3 a.m. And I really would start writing at 10 p.m., and it was really hard to change because once you have a baby, you can't keep those hours. You actually have to be awake for the baby during the daytime, and you can't do that if you went to bed at 3 or 5 a.m. So I really had to kind of change my brain. And my kid now is 16, so it's been 16 years of working during the day, and now I kind of keep banker's hours. I think Victoria Aveyard is the same way, where you're at your desk from, 9 to 5. But what I find is that I work pretty much from 7 a.m. to about lunchtime. And depending on how involved I am and how hungry I am, but lunch is kind of the end. So at the end of the creative day, because after lunch I can't do anything creative. So I try to work from 7 a.m. to about 1 p.m. And then have lunch and then do all the admin tasks for after lunch, from 2 p.m. to about 6, have dinner with my family. And I still am able to work at night now since she's a teenager. So I kind of start again around 8 p.m. depending on, what's due. So 8 p.m. to about midnight, is the second chunk of creative time. And that's kind of my routine.
I don't have that second chunk.
The second chunk is hard. The second chunk only happens if there is like a big deadline happening. Because yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'll do it if there's a deadline, but
yeah.
um, yeah, I think that is something that for those of you who are still here, and you all are, I love you, uh, is treating it like a job. I think when I started writing, I thought inspiration will strike me one day, and it does, but only if you're in the chair already writing. Then you've invited it in and it will strike, but it's not going to strike you like after 4 cocktails that when you've gotten home from a party. Like, no, it's not going to. It's you needed to not go to the party and be typing some stupid stuff, and then you needed to sit down and do it. Whatever it doesn't. Of course, you can go to the party another day. But what I'm saying is, say I do this on the regular. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it comes out good because I showed up. But just showing up regularly, it's so unromantic. It's not a Parisian garret, and it's not, Hemingway in the cafes of Paris or whatever other glamour. We're in New York and LA, so maybe that's a tiny bit glamorous, but mostly it's just pajamas and the computer.
Yeah, it's really, and but what's funny, Emily, I just saw on Twitter the other day, another writer that I follow said, do any other writers feel like you really can't do anything else? Like you're not good at anything else. This is all you can do. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of all I can do. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible driver. I'm a kind of mediocre cook, I'm a good mom, I'm a good friend, but other than that, everybody else is better than me at everything,
That, first of all, you fundraise. I know you do all
Okay.
that fundraising for all the Y'all Fest and Y'all West festivals, right?
But at delegating,
And you make people follow you, right?
Mhm.
You're like, oh, I happen to run an imprint now. I run a book festival now. And everyone's like, oh, yes, you do. And then they do what you say.
Yeah, no, I'm bossy. I was
Oh.
the oldest child, so I'm a very bossy person.
No, I think you like huge leadership and uh, kind of just making things happen skills.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I like to do things. I'm a joiner. I told my daughter, I was like, it's not cool to be cool. Cool people don't get to do anything. Me and my friends, we were all just like, yes, we'll run the student council. Sure, we'll do the yearbook. Okay, we'll do that, fundraiser, and I've just been like that since I was in high school, and nerds win, and that's just the way life is. Sorry.
I love that. So I'm going to ask one more question of my own, which kind of taps into what you were just saying or stems from that, which is you went to Columbia and studied art history. And I think, so many people think they have to study creative writing undergrad, or they have to know that that's what they're doing, when they're in college. And I wondered, like, if you could just talk for a minute about how your undergraduate study ended up, folding or shaping itself into your career.
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a writer, but for some reason I didn't want to major in creative writing, which was a major at Columbia. I double majored. I was actually an English major and an art history major. But I was not a creative writing major. I don't know. I felt like that was too navel gazing, maybe. And I didn't want it to be something that I was graded on. I don't know if that makes sense. I just thought like I can be a writer, but I want to learn about other things, and I think it's more interesting when you learn about other things, because I kind of knew that I would always have the writing, but I wanted to learn about art history, and I wanted, to read English literature. So that's what I did. So I think, especially the art history was really, it was such a huge part of Blue Bloods, and a huge part of what I'm interested in, and kind of comes out in, here and there in my books, which is funny because I don't have an aesthetic sense at all, and nobody should ever listen to me when it comes to covers, because I always have the wrong take. Like literally everybody would be like, we love this cover, and I'll be like, I don't know, and then later on people will be like, yeah, that's such a great cover. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I think if you're going to be a writer, you're going to be a writer no matter what. But I did want to go to MFA programs. After I graduated, I applied to several of them, and I got rejected from every one. So it was not the path for me.
Did it anyway.
Yeah, it's funny because somebody said, why did you not get discouraged? And I thought, oh, I just thought they were wrong. I just thought, yeah, you're wrong. Next one.
I love that. I love it. Okay, so we're wrapping up. You're amazing. I also love that your outfit matches your book. It is so good.
This is their books. So this is they're
beautiful.
and I bought it because I'm going to do a lot of promotion, and I thought, oh, what a perfect dress for a writer. So.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, and it matches the book. This is the book. If you were here with us today and you don't have it yet, you can obviously get it at your local Barnes and Noble. It is available, and if you ordered a signed copy, I think this is right, they will ship in 8 to 10 business days.
Yes.
And The Rose and the Crown.
Ring in the Crown.
What? The Ring of the Crown, The Ring of the Crown. I remember that book, but obviously not the title very well. The Ring and the Crown is Melissa's favorite of her books that you haven't heard of yet, so you should go get that. And you're so awesome for joining us. Everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you want to say anything before we go, Melissa?
Thank you so much, Emily. Again, thank you for doing this. It's such a pleasure. And Going Dark is out today. You can get it at any place that sells books near you. And I have a young adult thriller called The Headmaster's List coming out in a month. And then after that, I have Snow and Poison, which is a fairy tale retelling of Snow White set in Bavaria. It's based on the original inspiration for Snow White. And then after that, I have the sequel to the new Blue Blood spinoff, Afterlife After Death, comes out in July. And then after that, I have a new middle grade from Disney that we just announced called the Super Secret Octagon Valley Society, which is a little bit like if Willy Wonka ran Google. So a bunch of the smartest sixth graders in the world get to go to the Octagon Valley Institute, and mayhem ensues. And then after that, we have the fourth book in the Never After series, my new middle grade fairy tale series. And that was book 4. And then that is my year.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you have the right dress.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.